right, Jen, take it away.
Are we there? Are we there yet?
Yep.
Cool. So, hey everyone, welcome back to KreweChats, where a bunch of Marketo nerds talk about Marketo because we like it. If you've missed any, you can catch them all in the Marketo community, or if you're watching this on YouTube, they're going to be all over the side there. And we're also recording it, so you can watch it later in the community if you want to, which I recommend because we'll have some fun links for you to check out. It makes life easier for you. If you want to talk to us during the video at all, you can tweet to us using the hashtag, which is at the bottom. We're also recording it. Or you can follow any of us on Twitter using our handles located in our lower third section, which is somewhere down here. So I guess without further ado, let's just introduce ourselves quick and then get into it. So I'm Jen. I'm a marketing automation consultant at RevEngine Marketing. And for fun facts of the week, which we do, I'm going to choose to do a favorite hobby. And my favorite hobby is knitting. So Joe, you're next.
Cool. My name is Joe Reitz. I'm a strategist at Fathom. My favorite hobby is probably photography.
Cool.
Jeff, I think it's you.
So I'm Jeff Krajewski. I am the marketing automation specialist with PR Newswire at Cision Company. My favorite hobby is fly fishing.
Nice. Dory.
Hi, I'm Dory Viscagliosi. I actually have a new role to announce. Super exciting. So I am now the Senior Marketing Operations Manager at Datto in Norwalk, Connecticut. And my favorite hobby is drinking good beer.
Oh.
Sorry, did I say hobby?
I love that hobby.
Oh, okay, cool.
You stole from like all of us is what happened.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Okay, so fine. My favorite hobby is drinking. Is that better?
Yeah. All right, Rachel.
I am Rachel, and I am a marketing operations and growth manager at TubeMogul, which is an ad tech company in the Bay Area. And my favorite hobby, oh gosh, I don't even know that I have a hobby. I like photography, but Joe's much better than me. I like hiking, if that's called a hobby. So, yeah.
That's a hobby.
It is.
Okay. And wine. I like wine.
Oh, I like wine too.
Yeah.
Who doesn't enjoy drinking as their hobby?
I'm
I'm Sydney. I'm the Senior Marketing Operations Analyst at Frisia, and my favorite hobby is baking/eating.
Ooh, I like that one too. And Brent?
Oh, sorry, I was the last one to go. Right now I'm the lead strategist at Fathom, the Marketo team. Favorite hobby was going to be drinking wine, but I'll go with drinking coffee as the number 2. Not Starbucks, good coffee. Good coffee.
Oh, good. Another non-Starbucks fan.
Ooh, Starbucks is the worst.
Yeah.
I love Starbucks.
Uh-oh. That's the end of our relationship. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking about workspaces and partitions, which based on discussions I've been having lately, it seems like it's something that all the cool kids are using, or at least know way more about than I do. But basically, there's not a whole lot of information to help us out. I've been trying to do some research, and I understand it, but I haven't really seen any use cases. So that's kind of why we're here to talk about that, kind of get down to basics, and then dive into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty. So I'm going to start out by grilling Joe. You and possibly Brent and Jeff have probably work with partitions and workspaces the most. So why don't you tell us what they're used for and maybe why you'd want to use them?
Sure, yeah. In the most simple sense, to understand one, you kind of have to understand the other. So a workspace is essentially, if you think about it like a suitcase, you put all your assets inside it and off you go. But inside that, you might have various compartments for like a shave kit, socks, or whatever. And that's kind of how you can think about a lead space. It fits inside of a workspace. But workspaces are permission-based, so you can have access to one or several different workspaces, and you can share assets between. So think of your programs, smart campaigns, all of that. For non-templated assets, you usually have to clone them across, so that's why the permissions bit is a little important. or very important. And then for a lead partition, to answer that original question, these are basically, the easiest way to think about them is just self-contained lead databases. And they don't dedupe or mix together by default, and you actually kind of have to force a duplicate. So you can have the same lead living in two different databases and work with it in entirely different ways, or different partitions, I mean. So if you think of it like that private island kind of mentality, that kind of works if you're into metaphors like me. But typically you'd want to use these in a use case like if you had different regions or business units or something like that you wanted to had some kind of business reason for wanting to keep leads separate, and there wasn't really a concern with having dupes.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in?
I'll add.
Reiterate.
Go
ahead, Brad.
Okay, I'll go. So just building off that a bit, I think one important note there is that a workspace can see multiple lead partitions. I think that's an important thing to know. So if you have a default workspace that only manages data, that can see all the partitions, and if you have a North American workspace that would work North American leads, it can only see the North American partition.
Yep, and that's actually where I was going with it, was multiple workspaces can see into different, but the partitions, you mainly either have a different business case or a different team that's handling that type of data, and that's really the reason for that kind of separation.
Okay, so what if someone is in one partition and then they go and fill out a form and they're in another partition? What happens with that data?
I feel like you're not going to like the answer to it.
Yeah, I might have a half answer to this question. I used Workspaces at my last company, and we had frequent issues where we would have a lead that ended up on the wrong website, which happens, and filled out a form, but they already existed in a different partition, and Marketo pretty much just threw an error and said, sorry, this lead will not be added to this program because it already exists in another partition. There may be some happy way around that I'm not aware of.
So, quick question about that. So, is there a way to send an alert based off of a failed lead creation due to partition issues, or is it just you look at those smart campaigns and notice that people aren't being created?
Yeah, I think it was just that we were looking at the smart campaigns. I don't remember that it showed up in notifications. If it was in notifications, you could maybe subscribe to the alert, but I don't think that it shows up in notifications. Someone that's worked with these more recently may be able to correct me on that.
Yeah, I don't think it shows up as a notification. There is some back-end work that Marketo can do to force duplicates. It has to happen on the Marketo technical professional services end. No agency or client side would have access to it. But then that gets hard because then which cookie are you tracking, which data is the most recent, and all that fun stuff. So it's not a pretty way, it's not a fun way to do it either.
Brent and Joe, since you guys have done this more recently, sorry I didn't mean to interrupt you, but do you think that even with that issue, if you're running into that regularly, is that a case to not use Workspaces in that scenario?
I would say it's a case not to. Well, it would be a case not to use partitions, since Workspaces can see many different partitions. There are some clever things you can actually do with partitions. So we had a client recently who wanted, I can't remember the exact scenario, but basically, you could either live in one business unit, you could live in another business unit, or you could live in both business units. So we actually created partitions for if you lived in one business unit, if you lived in both business units, or if you lived in a completely separate one, and set the partition rules based on flags, and then use smart campaigns to update flags. It's hard to get into in a 30-minute call, but there are some creative ways you can use partitions if they're absolutely necessary, but they're a tricky beast, and if you can stay away from them, I always recommend staying away from partitions. I do love Workspaces, though. So
they're not for the faint of heart, basically.
They're only, specific business cases that you have to use them.
Yeah. but I mean, that's a good point to back up and talk about, a lot of the confusion that happens around workspaces versus partitions is, well, and I think it's a disservice just call them partitions. I think that's why Marketo likes to call them lead partitions, because it's easy to think about something having to do with leads only as a lead database if you include that word. But then, workspaces are all about the assets, and like who has visibility to what, who sees what. So a lot of use cases for workspaces revolve around, you could have one set up to do kind of like if you didn't have a sandbox, you could use a sandbox. You could have workspaces set up to handle clients versus like actual customers versus prospects differently, or even subdivide other business units without the need to subdivide further into lead databases or lead partitions. So there's definitely a lot of confusion, I think, just in the Marketo community about which does what and which one do you need. Generally, like everything else in life, the simpler the better, generally. But there still are a few applications out there for when lead partition would be the right thing.
Okay.
So I have a question. Why would you use partitions versus like segmentations? Because couldn't you move people between segments a little bit easier as well? So like in the use case, I think that Brent was talking about, you have 3 different business cases and you have people who are, there's 3 different, I guess, business cases that they're, that you're marketing to. Why wouldn't you use segments?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get away with it, I think that's generally a simpler option to go with. We had someone recently that did the same thing, right?
Yeah, so I think you can hear that here, but so the biggest thing I've seen, and some others may have different perspectives, but is legal applications. There's cases where you legally can't market to a certain set of leads, or you have like business agreements between your different business units. Those are the most hard rules. There are other cases, but generally segmentation can accomplish what you need it to. You just have to be somewhat trustworthy in other business units. I think it comes down to trust a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, and especially with the European Union and Canada with their castle laws, speaking of the legal implications, that's something that you really need to take into account and focus on.
Yeah, I mean, at a past job, we had the weird scenario of like we had internal groups that were actually competitors, so they were part of the company. We still reported on the same kind of performance stuff. They weren't technically in our Marketo instance, but we did we did certain things for them, like certain programs and things like that. But because of the lead routing, there was, and we didn't have them separated with partitions. We had to do a lot of crazy, pretty high-end work inside of Marketo, integrating with Salesforce to make sure that they got tagged and routed appropriately, just because of how sensitive, those I don't know if that's legal or business, or maybe a hybrid of both. Like whatever those restrictions were, we had to be very cognizant of them. And in that case, looking back, in hindsight being what it is, partitions would have been an excellent way of managing that. But yeah.
Hindsight's 2020, Joe.
That's right.
There was a good application of using Workspaces at my last company because we needed the permissions aspect, basically, that we needed certain marketers to be able to only access the programs that were in their partition. So that was the workspace, excuse me, I'm getting the terminology down.
So in regards to workspaces, I guess, so say you have one company and then they have multiple divisions or sub-companies or whatever you've got going on, and each of those places has their own workspace. What is, I guess, the best practice around things like naming conventions, program statuses, etc., since you might have one division, going bonkers doing whatever it is that they do, and you're doing your own thing? I mean, should they be similar or the same, or can you do something completely different?
I mean, you have the opportunity to absolutely do something different, but I think the more consistent you are, the easier it is to train across lines like that. So I would always advocate, if you can have something be consistent and predictable and trainable, that makes, if you ever need to jump in and help someone across like another brand or something like that, it's not too difficult to make that jump. Now, granted, everyone's probably doing their own reporting separately, so it's probably, generally speaking, at a super high level, not going to be that big of an issue. But yeah, I mean, that's my personal perspective on it.
I mean, it probably helps too if you want to like steal a program from someone else. Like maybe there's a UK division and you like something that they did that could apply to yours. Like it probably helps.
No, I don't steal programs. People steal from me.
Why am I not surprised?
Because everything that Joe does is the best.
Right.
Have I shown you the ready?
I love working with him.
Yeah, it's a journey.
How could you not? I guess, so can partitions sync to multiple Salesforce instances? I know a lot of people are synced to something, to either Salesforce or one of the other few CRMs. So can it be synced to multiples, or is it just one?
So without a third party, in most cases, if you have a single Salesforce instance and a single Marketo instance, you actually can't sync to multiple Salesforce instances. You would have to either have a separate Marketo instance, and you do have the ability to clone across instances, which you have to reach out to support to enable, or you have to find middleware, which there are some options out there. I'm just not going to get into them because I don't know all of them.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. That it can be done, but you have to engage with Marketo support. You have to, and the other thing to consider is Marketo. The API is limited to so many calls. So the more complicated the application, the less likely that it is to work well. But then beyond that, yeah, it's just not a clean thing to do, and it's just generally easier to have separate instances. Like if you're talking about a big enterprise-wide deployment, it's always going to be easier to have several instances of Marketo reporting to different instances of whatever CRM you're using versus all going into one Marketo going into several.
Now, the flip side, having recently been acquired, PR Newswire was acquired by Cision. We're looking at actually consolidating as a long-term effort, but that in and of itself, you got to align your models, align other things, and then work on that whole partitioning and segmentation aspect.
From a, I don't want to get too salesy for Marketo here, but from a billing standpoint, I guess, or a cost standpoint, either Jeff or Brent or Joe, can you expand for people on is this included in a subscription, in your instance, or is this something that you are adding on, and what are you guys looking at?
In terms of adding multiple syncs,
Workspaces
and partitions.
Going back to Workspaces and Partitions.
Yeah. Technically, they're not included. Usually, it can be negotiated. I don't want to speak for the sales rep or the CAM, but it's not technically included.
Strong arm your rep.
I know that we paid for our Workspaces at my last company, and they were kind of expensive.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that you want to do, too, I know Joe spoke to the API limit. You can actually up that, but, again, it's something you need to negotiate with your rep.
Yeah, and the reason it's expensive is because it's complicated and it sucks. So, I mean, and the reality is do you really need it? I mean, sometimes yes, but yeah,
So it's not a decision you want to make just willy-nilly, like, hey, this seems like a good idea, let's do it,
I mean, I don't make too many decisions willy-nilly at the price point of marketing automation and anything else in the MarTech stack, but
literally anything.
Another thing to know is, so at the end of my time with my last company, we had just decided to get out of the Workspaces. The problem is if you were to make a willy-nilly decision, which we all know Joe never would, if you were to make a willy-nilly decision to move into Workspaces and Partitions, when you're leaving a workspace, there was no way for us to preserve the programs that were built in the Workspaces we weren't using anymore. They were taking them away and everything disappeared.
Ouch.
So did all of your reporting disappear as well?
Yeah, so what we did was we moved to at least this is how ours was set up. I'm not sure if this is how everything is set up, but we had 2 different workspaces and then 1 common workspace where all of the leads lived. So each workspace had its own partition as well. We didn't have 1 workspace that read into multiple partitions. So the admin workspace is what we called it, also had access to all of the leads. And we just started building out all of our programs at the beginning of the year in that workspace until we felt like we'd built up enough reporting data to lose the rest of it and it not be absolutely detrimental to everything. But again, we were still paying like a lot of money to keep those workspaces on as long as we did. They also said that we could rebuild any programs we felt like were really important and re-import the leads with all of their program statuses into those programs, which you can imagine how long that would take. And for it to actually look right in reporting, we would have had to change the success date for everyone and change the acquisition program for everyone. So it was just a nightmare. We ended up not doing it, but they did end up getting out of the workspaces.
The dates wouldn't line up either, right? Because as we all know, we can't really go backwards with a lot of dates.
Well, if you change the success date, it'll fix the multi-touch attribution. And if you fix the acquisition program, it'll change the first touch attribution. It's not perfect, and it takes a long time.
Of course. So basically, don't go into this all willy-nilly, right, Joe?
Right, no willy-nilly.
Joe wouldn't even consider it, so whatevs. Well, I mean, I'm all out of my workspaces and partitions questions unless any of you guys want to dive into something else. Bueller? Bueller?
I think Joe was trying to talk, but he couldn't.
It's very light. Well,
going through me. I mean, I'll add something is that successful is with data management. If you have a bunch of either really green people who are new to marketing automation or just marketing in general, or you have a lot of hands in the pot, so to speak, a workspace separate to data management where only the people who know Marketo can access it, I think is super valuable because then at least you know the data should be clean, if nothing else.
Yeah, and something just to tag along on Brent's comment there is one of the key things about the partitions is you can, in Workspaces, you can, as you're setting up users, get them aligned accordingly. So to keeping hands out of the pot, so to speak, you can get that lined up and not have to worry about it further down the road with certain roles that you set up.
Yeah, exactly. Although I hear they're coming out with folder permissions eventually, so that may solve that problem.
That would be so nice.
Yeah.
So many more permissions would be so nice. Although, I mean, maybe we could jump in really quick to the summer release notes, right?
yes!
And that has some really exciting stuff.
Program tokens.
Program tokens!
Yeah.
That was the most exciting thing on that list.
That
Yeah,
was
they really downplayed it.
I know, that's probably my #1.
Don't forget ABM and the launch parties that are happening on Tuesday with all Marketo user groups.
Yeah,
True.
it'll be fun. But program tokens, Jeff. Program
Oh, I know. I'm excited.
Who cares about ABM when you can have program tokens?
That's so true. Who would pay for ABM if we could just have program tokens? Let me ask this to you guys. Do you guys use the email 2.0 yet?
Yes.
Yes,
I have.
strongly recommend it.
I have not. If you're doing anything with the API, be somewhat cautious because the API cannot utilize 2.0 emails yet. So I haven't really dug deep enough yet at Datto. I literally switched like this week, but when I was at eMarketer, we were sending out multiple emails a day from the API, like that were all cloned and developed and populated by the API. And so those assets do not work with the email 2.0 editor. Or, I'm sorry, email 2.0 assets do not work with the API. Sorry, that's a better way of describing it. They will have that, or so they say, by the end of the year. So one word of caution.
So if we're not using the
rebuild
API, it's pretty safe to start using 2.0.
I've heard it's really great. I wish I could have switched over.
Yeah, I really like it.
The one thing that we've seen that's somewhat minute, but it's important to be aware of, is that there have been some problems in some people's instances where like the text, the HTML to text doesn't work properly. It'll show up blank. That doesn't usually matter, except for really from a deliverability standpoint. But it's something to be aware of. Like you can't click the copy HTML to text button. You can, if you're using an old template, sometimes it doesn't always work. You have to use specific div tags.
Okay, that was my next question. Did you have to rebuild all of your templates to move over to email 2.0?
We didn't have to rebuild them.
Okay.
No, I think you have to be really cautious if you have multiple divs with the same ID, if I recall. That's going to be a problem. But otherwise, you should be okay.
Yeah, if you follow W3C standards, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, cool. I've honestly just been afraid to activate it because I didn't want it to break everything. But maybe I'll try.
As long as you don't go back in and like edit your emails on 1.0, then they won't do anything crazy. So if you have
okay, maybe that's why I stopped, because we still have nurture emails that are on 1.0.
Yeah, so if you're going to go back and edit them after you switch to 2.0, then things could get screwy.
So it's like a system-wide switch.
Yeah.
But it's like a light switch. You can turn it on and off. So you can...
Oh, you can?
Yeah, you can do 2.0 stuff, and then you could turn the 2.0 editor off and go back to 1.0 emails. It was my understanding of what Justin was saying. So the reason I didn't do that with our instance, our previous instance, was because our API would be generating assets at any given time, and so I didn't necessarily know when one of our other teams was going to press this little magical button on some service that they'd created that would generate the new asset, and so then that could have potentially been creating an asset in 2.0. But my understanding was that it's kind of like a light switch. You can go back and forth.
Cool.
You could double check with Justin Cooperman. He would definitely, in that thread in the community, he can really give you some more insight there.
Yeah, and I'll just confirm that is the case. I've checked that in our sandbox. So it's literally just a toggle switch that you can flip back and forth.
Okay. All right. All right. So just to be nice about getting everyone out on a Friday, I think that's it for us. So yeah, we'll see you around. Check out the community. We'll have this posted with relevant links below, and we'll see you in 2 weeks again. So bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining.